So it's been almost exactly a year since the first video that we put up here doing a tour of the garden, and that was during a year of extreme drought. It was actually the peak of a 13 years of drought, and that is definitely not the case this year. We have just the reverse. So I thought it would be nice to do a one-year follow-up video during a really lush year where we've had more rain than usual. And it's just been beautiful. It's been raining about every 3 days on average, I would say. Not too much. It's just been perfect. I mean, it's been too much for the farmers, but for us here with our little 125 by 50 foot urban lot, it's been wonderful. So let's get into it. All the flowers haven't even woken up, but let's go for a little tour of the Yarden. So I figured I would start this year's tour in the back lane, as last year's was started in the front. And so you can see we put this little raspberry patch in here, and there's all kinds of raspberries. It's been a tremendous year for berries. And this is a pattern here that I would like to see a lot more people replicate, is just putting some raspberries in that little strip in your back lane there. When people walk past, and they maybe say, wow, your yard is so interesting or beautiful. And we say, yeah, you help yourself to those raspberries. Those are fair game. And it's you know, the only maintenance involved is to throw a couple shovelfuls of compost on there every year. And it's a nice little conversation starter, builds a little bit of community. I mean, we go eat those raspberries too, but definitely we've seen lots of people come by and eat them. So the last of the Saskatoon berries here are ripening. It's been a good year for them too. And this rose over here needs a little bit of iron. So let's head on into the yard. We put a male sea buckthorn finally, after like 10 years of having only a female. We finally put a male in this spring. So we will now actually get berries. We did have a male originally, it just died off. And I haven't really like gussied up the yard at all before this video, other than putting up the hammock. So, you know, here it is in its raw state, folks. Piles of stuff. So here we got these 3 rain barrels. One's coming off our neighbor's shed. They were nice enough to let us put an eaves trough onto theirs, because their roof sloped in our direction. And then one is coming off of our garden shed, and one is coming off of the wood shed here. So the wood shed is pretty great. It creates this little overhang, and we have a little barbecue area. Eventually we're going to try and bridge those 2 roofs, because we'd have to get a permit if we were going to just build the 2 buildings together. But if we just put a little bit of plastic over top, I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's first thing in the morning, people. Then we will have a totally dry spot there. But so this is 3 cords of wood. This all comes from the urban landscape. I know an arborist, and we barter wood for osteopathic treatment, and that middle wood is all scrap from a local company that builds shipping containers, like kind of custom pallets for the aerospace industry. So I got that whole middle area there of poplar and conifer for $120. It's not too bad. So we'll grow things up this woodshed as well, like this little cucamelon over here. It's just getting started yet. And yeah, and there's lots of nice things you can do, like hanging those lights on there and the wood chimes. Last year we added in this little greens bed, and this year we added the screen over top of it. This is from Kootenay Covers. Now these greens are just getting started, because you can see a rabbit got in there in the spring, and then that let in the cabbage moths and the flea beetles. So we'll compare it with the other greens bed that didn't have that happen. But by the fall that'll be bountiful as well. See, the chamomile hasn't even woken up. It's like one of them is just starting to stretch its arms. So it's beautiful. So that's our fire pit, and that little cover there turns it into a tabletop. My wife built that. I went and pulled some scrap wood out of a construction site That's a good pattern my uncle taught me. Go on a Sunday and you can go into the bins because none of the tradespeople are there, and you can pull out pretty much as much wood as you want. It's incredible what gets thrown away. Found lots of OSB and like full bats of insulation, weeping tile, whatever you want. And the same thing was with this over here, which is going to be an outdoor kitchen. My wife built this as well, again with the scrap wood that I harvested from the dumpsters. So that space there is where the sink is going to go into. We're having our kitchen renovated right now, so the old sink's going to go in there. And I'm thinking that I'm going to hook up the water from the top water storage container in the background there, or perhaps from this rain barrel here, maybe both, along with the hose if need be. So we got the clothesline. This is now a nice place to rest the hamper. Well, the clothesline is there too. Hey, and while we're at it, I'm going to show you something else beautiful that my wife made. She's an artist, right? So, Prairie Girl Pottery. Shout out. So she took an old motorcycle tire that her deceased brother used to race with, and she filled it full of cement, and into that cement she pressed this pottery that she had made using a doily from her grandmother. So she pressed the doily in and then glazed it all these different colors and cut out the shapes and pressed it into here. So it's a sunflower. So that post my dad made, welded together, and just going to paint that green. So all around the yard, now that it's been 11 years since most of this was installed, sometimes a little shorter, that's a licorice plant there. Everything's just starting to spread and grow. Here's licorice again, here's licorice again. And that licorice is not only the licorice root that you would use for tea or medicine, and we do use it for that, but it also is a nitrogen fixer, which is pretty incredible that it's also then fertilizing everything. And you can see here in the pathways in the garden, it just pops up here and there. And lots of things do that, like cilantro and dill and borage, and even these big beautiful sunflowers, which the birds and the squirrels have been planting for us. So this is our main annual vegetable garden. We added to the hoops this year more of those Kootenay covers, like I was saying, if we want to keep the cabbage moths or flea beetles out. But then as well, we've got from Northern Greenhouse here in Manitoba. This is a 14 mil poly. It's incredibly strong. You can take it and hold it in two hands and try and tear it, and it just laughs at you. So in the event that it's going to hail, then we can just unclip these and furl them down, which is why there is tennis balls on top of these tomato stakes. Then we can just quickly throw it over top, save our crop. But also in the spring and the fall, then we can roll those down and it becomes a greenhouse. So there's a little goji berry plant hiding back in there. And we tried something new this year. Instead of buying the straw mulch from the store, we've actually planted our own mulch in terms of peas and nasturtium. We just let this wood sorrel grow in here, and it's working out really well. You can see some of the radishes that we started off with in the spring in between the tomato plants before the plants were too big. Those radishes have gone to seed, so we'll be harvesting some of that for next year. We've got all kinds of peas going on here. I'm going to try and keep moving. I don't want to list every plant in the whole place. That's going to take too long, but look at the size of these zucchini leaves. That is a happy plant, right? Oh, but this plant I am going to definitely talk about a little bit. This is false indigo, and so you see these little bean-like pods. You cannot eat them, unfortunately, but it is a nitrogen fixer. And so this is a native plant, and it's just, wow, is it happy this year. It's just awesome. And you can see the sunflower that's growing right beside it is very happy with all that nitrogen. So this is our Cruciferous Vegetable Bed. So there's lots of kale and kohlrabi and everything in here. I had the best kohlrabi of my life out of here yesterday. So I'm just going to lift up this so you can see. So we've been harvesting lots of kale out of here already. But man, when it's a good year in the garden, it's a good year in the garden. So this is the difference between a little bit more sun and a little bit earlier of a start. So you can see what a difference it'll make to have those the poly covers in the spring and in the fall. We're hoping to ripen as many of the tomatoes on the vine as we can. So yeah, we've got squash climbing up here. There's all kinds of dill and borage. The bees are up and awake. See if you can see this one here. Nice bee cruising around. I kind of say, why buy a cabin when you can make your backyard feel like the lake? That's a lot simpler. So this is the compost bin, and this area here, all these tall yellow flowers are 6, even 7 feet high. That was our parsnip bed. So those parsnips overwintered in the ground. They get way sweeter that way. They turn like their starches into sugars to make it like a form of antifreeze. And so we harvested those parsnips. We got 37 pounds of parsnips out of this little space this spring. It was amazing. And there was all these tiny little parsnips that I'm like, I'm not going to bother with those. So I just reseeded it. But all the parsnips, the first year, they just accumulate energy, and then the second year they produce seed. It's a 2-year life cycle for them. So now all those little parsnips have overtaken the seeded parsnips. And so we're not going to have any parsnips next spring, but we definitely have a ton of seed. I just didn't have the heart to pull all these out once they started going. Just wait till the afternoon sun's going, and this will just be covered in pollinators. So that'll be fun. I figure it's a little bit like letting the ground rest for a year too. So here is the raspberry patch, and man, it's just banging. Like, we can't keep up with it. We had 6 little kids in here 2 days ago, so you can imagine every half pink raspberry was snatched off of the plants, and yet there is just so many. So, and that's one of the things too, is we had always dreamed of having like a 5, 10, 15, 20 acre property, and now that we've got a 1/6 of an acre, it's like 0.16 of an acre, or 50 by 125 lot, that includes the house and the driveway and everything. So now that we have this small space, but we've really maximized its production over the course of the last decade plus, we can hardly keep up with harvesting everything. We often can't keep up with harvesting everything. So, we really don't need an incredibly large space. We just need some good local farmers that we're hooked up with. We just need people that we can source our firewood through. So our apple tree, again, like, just look at the way the branches are hanging down. We should probably even trim some of this fruit off, because we're risking breaking the branches. But this is a Prairie Magic. It's a good land and something I can never remember mix. Oh, there goes the little rabbit. And they get full size. They get bigger than the apples in the store. This is a little pear tree that we just planted this year. We're going to keep it pretty small. It's not going to be a espalier, but it's going to be almost like, sort of like a larger bonsai, if you will. We're going to keep it sort of like an oval shape is the plan anyways at this stage. You can see I've wired down the branches, and that's not to espalier it. I got this from Stefan, the permaculture orchard guy out in Quebec. But that if the branches are kept at 45 degrees angle, or lower to the ground, more horizontal, then they will turn into fruiting branches. Whereas if they aren't, then they'll be like here at the top of the apple tree, and that's not showing up at all, but where they're not giving fruit. They're just foliage. So we're going to try and pick the 1 liter there. That'll be the top of the tree, and then everything else is going to be prunable, fruit producing. And we've done something similar in terms of pruning with the apple tree here, because it's got this wire right overhead, so we couldn't just let it grow. Plus, as we get older, we don't want to be going up on ladders and picking apples way up in the air. So we've just trimmed it every year, and then we trim that in the winter, and then we throw it down for the rabbits to eat, and then the rabbits leave us fertilizer. This is our nice little sit and have your breakfast tea or lunch area. So it's a shade bed. I should say, come on, permaculture video, and I haven't even said this. This whole time I've been facing south. So currently facing south. When we look over to the garden, that is facing north. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. You can see the sun just rising here in the northeast. So we've got 2,600 liters of water storage here. That's 1,300 each. I'll show you how they overflow one into the other. You see the grapes are starting to climb along there. That helps protect the water and keep it cool so that there's less algae, but it also protects the plastic and makes it last longer. Eventually we're going to have a complete wooden cover, but we haven't gotten around to that yet. Here's a native mint that I found a place in the forest where there was an abundance of it. I took one little plant home. That was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and now there is a lot more than one little plant here. The black currant berries are also ripe right now. You can see one of them in the background there. I can get a better shot of that. Not everybody likes that plant, but man, I find them super tasty. So, just more raspberries, right? So these are a seedless grape variety. We're in USDA Zone 3 here. We planted these maybe 8 years ago, and again, this is not an ideal location for grapes, but once they finally made their way up out of the shade, they were able to really take off this year. So now they're spreading this way as well. I'm standing on my neighbor's driveway here. There's just this little 2 feet. Oh, and this is our friendly neighborhood rabbit. We've named it Nugget. And it's not afraid of us at all. It's really nice to just sit and watch. So we've made this primarily a flower area just because this is what our neighbors are looking at all the time. So there's some garlic tucked in there. And these hollyhocks, my wife has been trying for 10 years to get these hollyhocks going, and see, look how close we can get here. I'm about 2.5 feet away. Oh, there goes Nugget. My knee popping was a little bit too much. So, these hollyhocks finally took off this year. I don't know, we did the same thing as every other year, but they're now taller than me. It's just amazing. So beautiful. So, yeah, we got lots of garlic in here. There's thyme spreading. We got horseradish. The daylilies with their edible flowers are here. And more raspberries. This is the royal purple variety. So they're more finicky, they die a lot easier, they die a lot sooner, and they don't sucker. So you got to propagate them yourselves. So we ended up with some holes in there as we go along. But man, they produce really big, amazing fruits. And it goes, first it ripens red and it has one flavor, and then it ripens even more purple and gets an even deeper, richer flavor. Super delicious. So that's one of the, like, it's a little bit more of a poodle than a wolf kind of plants, a little bit more domesticated, that I'm willing to put up with because of the advantages it has in terms of production. We put some tennis balls here on these spikes of the cattle panel that we've used as a trellis because we don't want the little neighbor kids falling and hurting themselves. And these are a couple of tanks that I just put in this year. These are 680 liters each. They're from West, which is a local company. I wasn't super happy with my interaction with them, but I'm happy that the tanks are in now. And again, we're going to build like a wooden box around these so that they last not only 20 years, but longer than we do, hopefully. That's a wisteria plant growing up there. Again, that didn't do much for the first 5 years, and now it's just taken off. Got a Nanking cherry here. And all of those have been eaten already. Strangely enough, the Nanking cherry didn't do that much fruit production this year, even though everything else did. Oh good, the lilies are waking up now. So, even just in a little strip like this, you know, a couple of feet, a few feet between the two driveways, you can have a lot going on. This comfrey back in here was a little bit taller, and then we chopped and dropped it. If you're not familiar with what I mean by chopping and dropping, that just means cutting off the upper foliage and then dropping it down as a mulch, as a fertilizing mulch. And the interesting thing too about that is that there's a shoot versus root ratio that plants operate inside of. So if you chop off some of the shoots, the above ground portion of the plant, then it will kill off itself a corresponding amount of underground growth to keep the two aspects in balance. And what that does then is it also fertilizes the ground right there in place. So this happens naturally during growth cycles of the plant, or during times of drought and things like that, where the upper parts of the plant will drop foliage and be stressed. So it's actually, we're just replicating that. So again, here we've chopped all this comfrey. It was quite a bit taller before. This is another thing we've done this year, is we've planted this little basswood tree here on the boulevard. We have our beautiful ash tree with a grape climbing up it, surrounded by a Ness hyssop. But we were expecting this ash tree to die. So far, it's extremely healthy. But the emerald ash borer is coming through the city, and so we're expecting that it will die and we will get a lot more sun in our front yard. But we're trying to replicate the way that the forest operates and start the, what will be the canopy tree, start that before the current canopy dies completely. So this is a boulevard. There's all kinds of pollinator plants in there. And this is the front yard. So that's Sour sarsaparilla. That's a native ground cover. It's a really nice medicinal. It's in the ginseng family. It's spread and covered really nicely. There's all manner of pollinator plants up here. A lot of these are edible perennials, such as the sea holly in the background there. And as I mentioned, the Innis hyssop that makes such a nice tea. Bergamot, which has like an oregano flavor. There's lots of garlic tucked in here. In the first years of the Yarden, I went nuts putting in garlic just about everywhere. And now we mostly just eat the leaves in the spring and the scapes around this time of year. The seed heads, which all have a beautiful garlic flavor. And now that the garden's been in place for just over a decade, some of the things like the creeping thyme has really just spread beautifully. These garlic chives have just integrated themselves perfectly into a nice little polyculture with that thyme. They just love all the cracks in the bricks. Lots of stuff has showed up, like that wood sorrel. We got some peas going on with a zucchini underneath. This little planter here. Got some other herb planters. There's some more thyme. Lots of milkweed tucked in. That's a sea buckthorn in the background there. And wouldn't you know, we had this little peninsula, which used to be a herb spiral. Not such a fan of herb spirals anymore. But the sea buckthorn just sent out a sucker perfectly right to the middle of there. And it's like, okay, yep, I agree. So this is a plum tree. We've had nothing but trouble with it. We've had 3 plums in 10 years, but they're the best tasting plums that we've ever tasted. It's like the difference between a grocery store tomato in February and a tomato, hot from the sun from the garden. That's the difference in flavor of the plum. So we're just going to keep trying. It's a pest. It keeps boring into the fruit, and then the fruit drops early. So we'll see. I should mention, if people aren't familiar yet, that all the trails here are actually ditches. We dug a 2-foot ditch when we first put the property in. I'm going to make a video about this eventually and show the old pictures and stuff. So we dug a 2-foot ditch, and then we filled that ditch in with logs and things like that. We built a boardwalk over top of that with old scrap wood, and then we threw wood chips over top, and then in some places we even inoculated those wood chips with edible mushrooms. And so why did we do that? Well, here's some more water tanks that I just installed. When this tank fills, let's say the water comes down off the roof, and then this tank fills, then once it overflows, it'll come down. This is just a stopgap measure. I'm going to have better fittings and pipes. Then it goes down into that pipe, so it overflows into this pipe, and then that pipe comes down underneath these bricks and enters that ditch that I was just talking about. So all the water that overflows from the water storage goes into these trails and then gets stored here where it is best utilized, right in the landscape. So we actually don't contribute to the overland flooding. It all doesn't just end up in the river in 2 seconds. And where there's combined sewer systems, as is most of the city at this point, we don't contribute to the raw sewage ending up in the river. So even in USDA Zone 3, we've got an amazing crop of kiwis coming up this year on our hardy kiwi here. There is just so many. And so they taste exactly like regular kiwis, except they don't grow the fur on the outside, so you can just eat them whole like grapes. And man, this thing has such a presence now. It's the female on one side and the male on the other, but it makes such a nice archway as you come into this little pathway facing south to get into the backyard here. So every little space here, we've tucked in more raspberries. We're really pushing it with the light here, but because both of the walls have white stucco, then they reflect back and forth, and so we can just squeak in this sour cherry tree here. It tends to really climb to get the sun, and it took a little longer to start producing. There's some honeyberries back here. We did have some gooseberries, but they never produced, but because there wasn't enough sunlight and they got eaten by rabbits. But now they've suckered, so we're going to take some of those suckers and put them in some other spots, give that a try. Here's another honeyberry, or haskap they're sometimes called. A few more rain barrels. So those are 200 liters each. So just for reference, each of those rain barrels, like I just said, is 200 liters, and those big white ones are 680 liters each. So those tube ones there are equal to 7 of these. Here is the other cherry tree. Doing pretty good this year. It's already had a few eaten by the kids the other day. Just starting to ripen. But you know, kids, as long as it's red, they'll grab it and eat it because they enjoy picking stuff. Who can blame them? The most we've ever gotten from this tree was 14 pounds of fruit. That was 2 years ago. Yeah, so there you go. That's our little piece of paradise. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or something you'd like to have answered or addressed in another video, then yeah, feel free to comment below. Thanks. Hope you have a good one.